This is the 245th episode of CloudFocus Weekly for the second to last week of June 2016. This episode is titled, Let's Go NGO. CloudFocus Weekly is brought to you by Arkus, specializing in Salesforce implementations, consulting, and Force.com development. Search for Arkus, A-R-K-U-S, on the App Exchange and read what our clients have to say about us. I'm your host, and joining me 245 times in a row, hasn't skipped a beat, co-host with the most, Justin Edelstein.
I feel like that was cool.
You like that?
I do. I like it because it's like coming off the NBA Finals.
A little ringmaster, like
yeah, I'm into it.
Guy.
I'm into it. I like it a lot.
So we have a very special episode. Very special because we said we were going to talk about it. Very special because we're going to flip the script as we were, and I'm going to ask you about your stuff. And very special because you already have your picks ready. So that's very special.
That's pretty
that
special.
Alone is very
That's
special.
true.
And very special because this might be promoted a little bit more than our normal podcast is. So this time, absolutely no swearing, no gaffes, nothing.
I never swear.
And don't go neg.
I will never do that.
All right, we'll never do that. So this episode, we're going to kind of talk about two worlds colliding. The world of the NGO, nonprofits, and the world of Salesforce colliding together. We're going to do that in a couple ways. We're going to talk about our story because mostly you, have a nonprofit story. We're going to bring that in a little bit and talk about how that's kind of affected us as a company. And then we're going to, for people who maybe are starting off on their journey or maybe long time nonprofits, or who are saying, well, what is the thing with Salesforce and nonprofits? We're going to get into sort of where you could go, what you could do, things we like, things we don't. We won't do anything we won't do like. And we'll wrap it up with our normal picks of the week. So let's get into it.
Great.
First of all, I feel like it's been at least 6 months since we've had a podcast.
You mean CloudFocus Weekly?
Yes.
What are you talking about?
CloudFocus, every other weekly. Well, we've had some birthdays. We had Father's Day.
Father's Day, really?
Yeah.
That got in the way?
It got in the way.
Aren't those on Sundays usually?
They usually are.
Usually we don't podcast on the weekend?
Travel. So many things going on.
All these various different things?
Various different things going on. So let's start. And I'm going to ask you.
Oh, this doesn't normally happen on
I know,
this
that's why I
podcast.
said
I usually interview you.
That's right. This is
this is fun.
One time in your life you know more than I do.
Oh, I love this.
This is great.
Let's do this.
I'm going to go in the other room.
Let's do this more often.
All right. Well, this is the only thing you know more than I do about. Maybe like things that people don't care about on this podcast.
I know so many things about
yes.
things that you don't know
yes.
about.
They're all sports related.
Most.
Yes. 97% are sports related. So let's talk about kind of wanted the two things, like the Arkus story, since you're one of the founders of Arkus. I kind of like to hear your story because it comes from a nonprofit background. It's actually why us, Arkus, are big in the nonprofit space and why we do so much work and why we did the thing we did a couple weeks ago. So why don't you give that kind of story and make it happening?
The Justin
origin story?
Arkus
origin story.
Sure. So, you and I and our other partner who shall remain nameless worked together at this very large financial services institution, which also shall remain nameless. A lot of nameless things here. And it was back in the mid to late 2000s. Yeah.
Yep.
Aughts.
I think we throw 207 in there.
06, 07-ish. We got into Salesforce pretty big. And, the financial system sort of melted down a little bit. And I decided that I didn't want to work in that industry necessarily anymore, like at a large, one of these too big to fail type of places.
That failed.
and decided that I wanted to take my career on a different path. I knew I wanted to continue to work in Salesforce. I had already made that decision, which a lot of people are making day after day after day all over the place, and it's a testament. You see all these conferences popping up, and the awesome admin, and the clicks not code, and all of that stuff, and the community around Salesforce has grown so large. I feel like I'm an old man in this community, so I decided to take my talents to a non-for-profit called New Leaders for New Schools, which is what they were called at the time. They're now called New Leaders.
Yeah.
And they were looking for a full-time Salesforce administrator. And it was a national organization, had over 300 employees, and needed someone with some experience to help grow out their use of Salesforce. They had invested in it. They wanted to use it a lot more, and they needed someone to really help them take it to the next level.
So let me ask you, so I want to ask you now, because I think it's relevant, what's the connection between Salesforce and nonprofits?
Sure. So Salesforce gives every qualifying 501c3 10 free licenses to their technology. And they give them the same, version of Salesforce that a bigger company would buy. Basically, you're getting the enterprise edition of Salesforce, and you're getting 10 free licenses. So if you're a nonprofit that has 10 employees, well, great, everyone gets a license. If you're a nonprofit that has a fundraising or development department that is 10 or less users, and that's all you really care to use Salesforce for, great. They all get Salesforce for free, and they get this donation from Salesforce to use their technology gratis.
So
for the first 10.
So go more specific. How many nonprofits are using Salesforce?
Ooh, good question. I think it's somewhere between 25 and 30,000.
And how does it actually work? Like, because you said from Salesforce.
Correct.
So does it actually come from Salesforce, the corporation, CRM?
Not so much, sort of, technically, I guess. There's a separate entity called Salesforce.org that acts as their own. They are a foundation, but they're also like a social enterprise whereby they sell licenses to Salesforce. So not only are they granting out those 10 free, where people have to go to a website, you have to sign up, you have to prove that you are a 501c3, and then you get you start with a 30-day free trial, and then you get your 10 free licenses. There's a fork in the road that you have to choose, right? If you want to go, just give me the platform, the enterprise edition, or give me the nonprofit starter pack, which we could talk about in a minute or two. And Salesforce.org will also act as the traditional sales organization as well as product organization for the NGO and higher ed part of the Salesforce business. So they sell licenses at a deep, deep discount, and all the profits that they make, they then will use to grant out and use in the form of donating out their product, as well as donating out. They'll actually write grants for dollars for people to use, basically to use their technology, right? So
give someone $25,000 to go build out something cool on
hire
Salesforce.
A consultant, hire Arkus to build you a cool new program management application.
Yeah. So what kind of things have you seen nonprofits use the platform for? Like what kind of thing? And what's typical, and what's
So there's like two typical use cases, I would say. If I were breaking it down, I would say
that's what you're doing.
There's development or advancement where a fundraising department is leveraging Salesforce for its more traditional use of managing relationships with whether it be individual donors, major gifts, grants being given by foundations, corporations, government, so on and so forth, and managing all of the aspects of the fundraising and in some ways marketing and communications. So connecting, the incoming gifts to marketing platforms like Pardot or even Marketing Cloud. So using Salesforce's ecosystem of technology to really manage their messaging out and collecting money in. And then there's the program side of an NGO where you could be using maybe something completely different for fundraising, but you have to manage, let's just say, like a senior center or something like that. And you have a slew of constituents that are involved in one to many of your programs that you're offering at your senior center. And you have to keep track of their daily attendance, and you have to keep track of, other information about what that person is doing with your organization. So sometimes, and then like the best is when those two worlds collide and they meet, and fundraising and program are in the same Salesforce universe, and the fundraising department is raising money to fund the programs that are happening over here, and they're both in the same Salesforce instance, so you can actually see the impact as a member of the development team. You could just run some reports on what's going on with the program and feed that back to, if you had to feed information back to a grant or something like that, you'd be able to very easily pull that information. So it's a really great way of creating an ecosystem of just connected technology at a nonprofit that traditionally would not be able to do this type of thing because of the platform capabilities. You obviously have the fundraising stuff, which is, I hate to say it for those that are listening, but it's a lot like sales, right? You're selling, you're doing fundraising, and people who do that don't like that, but sorry. But then you have this technology platform that you can build lots and lots of, basically you can say, what does my nonprofit do? And then build out those things inside of Salesforce. Leveraging, again, marketing stuff. You can leverage communities to create communities for your constituents to collaborate with one another. Just a lot of people create application processes because for nonprofits, a lot of them you need to apply to get into this program. So they'll build the application process right on top of Salesforce, whether it's using an App Exchange product to pull in data right into Salesforce, whether it's using a community, whether it's using a sites page, what have you. You're still taking information, putting it into one shared place, which is really the key. Because at a lot of nonprofits, you've got disconnected systems, you've got spreadsheets, you've got Google Sheets, because Google gives them technology, and it's like, oh, just throw a Google form over here and a Google form over there, and soon you're starting to scale, and you realize that doesn't actually work. Salesforce allows you to grow into where you need to go.
So now, tell us, Justin.
More.
No more. Tell us how this affected or how this affects Arkus. Like, why are we talking about this?
Well, we are a preferred partner of Salesforce.org. So we're an implementation partner of Salesforce, period. We work with for-profit clients and we work with nonprofit clients. And we are one of the top partners on the NGO side of Salesforce's business. So we work a lot with nonprofits, specifically NGOs, as opposed to higher education. They kind of split it out, and we work really with nonprofits. And I guess you're asking me like where that came from. It's really, I worked at one, and when we started Arkus, I had worked at New Leaders for a little over a year. And I think I made it kind of clear, like, we need to continue to work with nonprofits because we want to give back to these organizations that are doing great work, and we can help them.
Yeah. And some of our first I mean, because of your connection, some of our first clients were from that space. So
I think
it was
a lot of our first clients were
so
nonprofits.
it was easy, and I would say seemed sort of just, now that I look back, a funny story. When I left the big company, I had a chance. I probably told this story before, but I had a chance to work at Salesforce and was kind of going down that path. Like, not like I had an offer letter, but it was like, hey, here's some connections, here's some people, here's a job opening. Like, do you want to start in the interview process? And so I was talking to a friend of mine at the time who worked, or still a friend, doesn't work at Salesforce anymore. And I was saying, I'm kind of having a little bit back and forth. I'm not sure if I want to go work for Salesforce, or if I want to go sort of be a consultant. And he's like, well, we're starting a consulting firm. And he said, well, what are you going to do? What kind of consulting firm are you going to do? And I remember saying, well, we're going to do everything. He's like, well, so what does that mean? And I said, well, we'll do retail. We'll do
whatever anyone asks.
We'll do anything. We'll work for, and we'll do it for any company. Like, we're not going to go into some sort of specific, area. Why would I? Because Salesforce is so universal. Why would I, just do one area? I'm going to do everything. And he said, well, why aren't you going to work in financial services? That's what your background is. That's where you came from. That's what you know. And I said, no, I don't need to do that. The joke is, of course, we basically went and started doing the things we knew the best. You came out knowing financial services and nonprofits the best. The other two knew financial services the best, and that's what we've been doing. Funny enough, it's sort of taken its own life. It's roughly about 45% of our business. It's nonprofit. Depends how you cut it. Like, there's lots of ways to think that up. We call it maybe 50%. Maybe we should just say 50%.
I think it's about 50%. It depends how you cut the numbers.
Yeah, you're cutting the number. Right. If you're cutting the numbers, right.
Number of projects,
raw numbers,
this,
clients,
that, the other.
right.
Yeah, there's lots of different ways to do it.
The one thing I didn't think you said, which was interesting in your story about Salesforce and NGOs, was the sort of 111 story. Which maybe it's just that everybody knows that.
I didn't get to it because I was waiting for this next question. Sort of question. Yeah.
So what did we just recently do?
Well, we just recently pledged 1%. So this is not necessarily a Salesforce thing, though we did it sort of through the Salesforce onboard ramp.
Right.
But, when Salesforce was started by Mark Benioff and Parker Harris, one of the first hires that they made was Suzanne DiBianco, who's still at Salesforce and runs the Salesforce Foundation, not to be confused with Salesforce.org. They're very tightly connected, but it is the foundation. And they started that foundation right away and decided that they would go down this model of philanthropy that they called 1-1-1, right? So 1% of equity, 1% of product, and 1% of their employees' time would be given back to non-for-profit organizations. And the joke always on the stage is, well, we had no people and we had no equity and we had no products, so it was really easy, right? And now when you look back, it's like, wow, you're powering, these numbers might be slightly inflated, but you're powering 25 to 30,000 nonprofits, and you're growing at a crazy rate.
Plus, you have
within this industry.
Plus, you have 20,000 employees, which you're then giving 1% of their time.
Basically 6 days.
Right. So
you get VTO, volunteer time off.
Right.
And I don't know the number, and I don't know if it's public, so won't really say it. But they've hit an astronomical number of hours that Salesforce as a company has given back to communities, whether it be going and helping to actually build out stuff on the technology, or going with like Habitat for Humanity and building houses,
right,
or whatever it might be, like cleaning up a park, or going into an impoverished neighborhood and helping out, like whatever it is. And it's always a part of the big conferences. Like you go to Dreamforce and it's like, everyone bring a can of food.
Right.
If everyone here just brings a can of food, we got 100,000 people. Bring a can of food.
Right.
Well, that's 100,000 cans of food that we can distribute across the city. And the same goes with, whenever you go to any of the regional world tours, there's always a philanthropic aspect to it, and it's a very noble thing that Salesforce has embarked on to keep it a part of and like weaved it into from the very begining.
You were
like
watching my hand signals.
They weaved it into the fabric of the organization, right? So they I don't know. You're mouthing things to me.
I was saying DNA.
Matter.
That's what it's part,
DNA.
it's part of the DNA of the company, and it's truly one of the things that, as we decided what we wanted to do with our next step in life, working with Salesforce, maybe not for Salesforce, but working with Salesforce. There's a lot of companies you can go consult for. I can go consult for Oracle. I can go consult for Microsoft. I can go consult for, you can do a lot of consulting for a lot of different companies. Obviously the platform, and there's lots of things about Salesforce that are just attractive. But the DNA of giving back is a very powerful feeling, and it helps when there are times when you feel like they're just another company. When you look at Salesforce and you feel like they're just another software vendor, there are parts of their DNA that show that they are not, and this is one of them. What's interesting is that Benioff's thing, and I actually don't know. I read his book, I read his other book. I think they came up with it, right, as sort of a theory. Yeah. It's now been adopted by some small companies like Google. And I think it's up to 750 other companies have done this thing called Pledge 1%, which is that you say that you're going to give back a percentage of something, right? Time, money, discounted things, whatever, and you make a formal pledge. And we just did it. The funny thing is, we always thought it was something very difficult to do, because we've been doing this for years, and we had been doing the qualification of it for years.
We didn't realize that we qualified without. It was something that I had inquired about, and in talking just in my initial meeting with, it was actually someone from Salesforce. She was like, you meet the qualifications already. Like, you don't have to do anything different than what you're already doing.
Right.
You already are a Pledge 1% company, and we're really, really proud of it.
Yeah.
We have a blog post out there announcing it. It's on our website. It's stuff that we talk about in some of the presentations and sales presentations that we've given. We're very proud to be a Pledge 1% company,
and to forward it along. I think that's part of what we liked about Salesforce. Or like about Salesforce is that they built into their DNA, and if we too can build it into our DNA, then again it kind of pushes it forward. And so, awesome thing. That's how we got into the NGO space. Let's talk about some of the resources, because Salesforce obviously is not just they're a platform. They have discounted nonprofit stuff. They have, if you're a 501c3, they'll give you 10 free licenses. They, have all this stuff, but they also do other stuff. So, give me a couple of things, or talk to me about the greater community of Salesforce nonprofit world.
Sure. So I think the greater community starts with the Power of Us hub. So for those in the Salesforce ecosystem who know, the Salesforce success community and ideas and answers, well, this is a sort of quartered off community just for nonprofits. And in order to get in to the secret society that is the Power of Us hub, you have to work at a 501c3 or be a partner of salesforce.org. So that's how we are in it, because we're partners and we can add value. And there are tons of, first of all, it's built around Chatter. So tons of Chatter, and they built it in an interesting way where, as opposed to like in the feed, as opposed to a post being like the first thing that you have in your publisher, a question is actually the first thing. So a lot of it is really about helping, because the resources are scarce, right? You could be at a 3-person nonprofit or a 2-person nonprofit, or even a 1-person, and you need help. So where do you go? Well, you can go to the Power of Us hub, and you can find a group and ask a question in a group. You can find, you don't even have to find a group. You can just post a question, and they are really good. They have very good community managers who are out there who sort of shepherd the questions to the right groups. and the members of the groups are really good about answering those questions.
Right.
So, I love like the Nonprofit Starter Pack group. It's one of my favorite groups. It's owned by Judy Sohn, who's a friend of the podcast, who's, an employee at Salesforce. She's the manager of the open source community for the Nonprofit Starter Pack. She owns this group, and it's a very active group. It has over 11,000 people in the group, all just asking questions about Nonprofit Starter Pack. And there's tons of useful links and resources on the left-hand navigation of just getting started with Nonprofit Starter Pack, getting started with Salesforce.
Why don't you take a second and tell us what Nonprofit Starter Pack is?
I'm going to get there in a second. Documentation around Nonprofit Starter Pack, the release notes, like they release like early and often. So Nonprofit Starter Pack, as I mentioned earlier, there's kind of this fork in a road when you go to sign up for the first time for your 10 free licenses or for your grant, your Power of Us grant. The Nonprofit Starter Pack is meant, just as it sounds, as and it's growing more and more, but as a good start for managing fundraising and volunteers on Salesforce. So they've taken into account what most fundraising departments and volunteer management organizations need and built that as a package in Salesforce. It's one package. There is an open source community around it, but it is also a package that is has like a continuous integration built into it. So they are releasing not necessarily on the Salesforce normal release cycle. They have their own series of sprints and releases that they do, and it includes, taking the opportunity object and like redoing the way that it works so that it can handle grants and in-kind gifts and recurring gifts and matching gifts and all the types of things that a fundraising department would need. They've taken like the account and looked at it as a household or an organization. They've taken it upon themselves to, well before Salesforce released like, one contact to many accounts in this new summer release, but they took it into their own hands and had solved for that in an interesting way, where you can have a person who's both an individual who gives but is affiliated to one or many organizations and is primarily affiliated to this organization where they work.
So to make it, so you say package, to make it feel simple for everybody, I mean, it is, we always make the analogy of pulling things off the App Exchange. Right? The App Exchange, so it is, Salesforce is not only just a piece of software, it's a software that can ingest other software, so you can install stuff. The Apple Store is probably the easiest, or Google Play Store, where I have a phone and I want to add new functionality into that phone. I install an application, and it then gives me new functionality. This more like takes over your phone a little bit and makes your phone look and behave a little bit different than it does. Because if you think of Salesforce, it's built for sales, traditional sales of products and opportunities and price books and accounts and contacts and lead conversion and all sort of great stuff. But when you install it, it kind of moves it into this new world, which is the best part. So it gets people who are, again, so of all those 30,000, 25 to 30,000 nonprofits who have signed up and are using Salesforce as their platform, they don't call things the same. They don't do things the same. They change it up, just like any other industry, just like the financial services industry or the health industry, right? They all kind of want to use it themselves. This is a quick and easy way to get people up and running, and then you take it from there. And there's lots of stuff you can do.
Then you can build on top of it, customize it. There's also HEDA, the higher ed data architecture, which is another version of this, which is really focused on universities and higher education. We're really mostly focused on Nonprofit Starter Pack and the traditional NGO world as opposed to higher ed, but that also exists as a resource for people.
Yep. Yeah. So last thing before we get to our little Dreamforce thing, So talk a little about if you were, I guess it's a totally leading question.
Are you leading the witness?
I'm leading the witness.
Yeah.
Where would you go, Justin,
Yes.
if you wanted to learn more about using Salesforce for your nonprofit, starting with Salesforce as your nonprofit, and or installing or getting the nonprofit starter pack up and running?
Sure. Well, I mean, to start, I would go into the Power of Us hub and I would join the nonprofit starter pack group.
Oh, you definitely have to start somewhere way before that. You go to salesforce.org.
Well, yeah, you sign up, you get your licenses,
okay,
and you do all that stuff. But then you'll see in the useful links, there's a nonprofit starter pack overview webinar. There's a getting started workbook. There's a data import workbook. And lastly, there is the Trailhead nonprofit trail for fundraising. And Trailhead, for those not in the know, is Salesforce's take on an online learning management system where it goes through a series of modules that make up a trail, a learning trail, and they're interactive. They're meant to be fun. And there is basically a managed fundraising for nonprofits. And right now there's a few modules. So there's the fundraising basics, so learning the basics of fundraising with Salesforce. There's donation management, so managing households, contacts, and donations in Salesforce. And then there's a bunch of coming soons.
Oh, really?
Yes. So there's grants management, volunteer management, soft credits, and matching gifts. So those are coming soon.
Wow.
So they're investing a little bit in getting more and more into Trailhead. Again, there's tons of documentation inside of the Power of Us hub, inside of the Nonprofit Starter Pack group specifically, but there are also inside of the Power of Us hub, there's also knowledge. So you can go into the knowledge base and look for particular or specific knowledge articles. There's a tab called Best Practice Nuggets, which is quite interesting. And there's also user groups. So user groups are really important, and you can find them in the Power of Us hub. And depending on what city you live in, there is likely a nonprofit-specific user group, and you will find it in there.
Salesforce user group for nonprofits.
Salesforce user group for nonprofits, right. Correct. There is a New York City nonprofit user group, which
very big.
I used to go to and no longer do, now that I am not working at a not-for-profit. But that is also very important. Get together with your peers, get presentations, ask questions, network, understand what other people are doing. It's very important. And Salesforce also has user groups just more generically. So there's there'll be a couple of different user groups in a city. So you can go to the New York City Salesforce user group, and it's not nonprofit. It's just Salesforce,
which I'm presenting at in 2 weeks.
Yeah, and you can learn some stuff there too. I'm certain of it. So definitely use the resources at your disposal. They're out there for you. They're free. I also should not skip. Just hit the help and training link when you log into Salesforce. I mean, there's a help and training link with videos and all sorts of fun stuff in there. There's also a link on every single page called Help for this page.
Right.
And if you click on it, you might actually figure out what you're looking for.
I really think the Power of Us hub is because, the community inside the community, it's like communityception.
Yes.
Because, like, if you go and try to find, like, you want to find RC, like remote control people who like remote controls. Right. Remote control cars or vehicles.
Yeah.
Guess what? It's too big. But if you said I want to find helicopter, certain size helicopter.
Drones. Could we do
all right,
drones?
let's do drones.
Let's do.
But
drones.
that's even a big space.
Yeah,
like,
let's do like drones that deliver Coca-Cola on stages.
I'm saying that those communities are usually the ones that are the most, I want to say, concentrated, right? Because they're small enough to still be
engaged.
Yeah, but it's concentrated because it's not the bigger community of everybody likes RC cars or RC vehicles. It's the people who like just flying helicopters, and they are passionate about. Oh, flying planes. Nobody flies planes. Planes are for nothing, right? Oh, cars, they're nada. But these people who love the helicopter people, and they are in it, and that's the thing, the piece that while there's this huge success community for Salesforce people, I have found that the Power of Us Hub, because it's this concentrated group. They are Salesforce users in the big, but they are this smaller group of people who are using it for nonprofits side, and then that's why I even get into that great group about the starter pack, and then it's even a smaller group, and that's why they're so vocal and they're so engaged and powerful, and because they're a concentrated group. So I think and there are LinkedIn groups for this stuff, but when you get those groups, those are usually the ones where you'll find the most help to help you get going. So speaking of help, let's give some people some help to go to Dreamforce.
Sure. So Dreamforce, Salesforce's one-time-a-year user, developer, partner, everything conference, is happening this year, October 4 through 7 in San Francisco. Dreamforce is an amazing experience. There is kind of nothing like it, in my opinion, from a conference perspective. It's more of a party than a conference.
Don't say that to your boss.
Yeah, no, don't say that to your boss. Say it's a educational experience, because it is.
Right.
It's what you make of it, actually. Because you could really just learn nothing at Dreamforce, or you could learn a lot at Dreamforce and like really take advantage of all the breakout sessions, hands-on trainings.
Right.
Go to the zones, speak with experts. I mean, it's all there. And Salesforce.org is very well represented. They have their own, just like the Power of Us Hub, they have their own sort of area and zone, as they call it, where you can go and, learn from experts, talk to partners that are exhibiting there, that focus solely on not-for-profit. Really great experience. And it's $400 for the registration if you're a nonprofit, with this promo code D16 NP 400 F6. That is terrible, hard to remember, so I'm going to repeat it.
No.
Say it slow.
They're all pieces of it. So D16,
not really.
Dreamforce 16,
NP,
nonprofit.
What's the rest?
400 for show.
Faux show?
For show.
Okay, got it. Full show, maybe? Full show as opposed to partial show? Full sandbox?
Full Salesforce?
All right. Anyway, it's
show.
D16 NP 400 FS. So at checkout, when you're going through the registration flow, put that code in. It'll only be $400. Don't get scared as you're going through, and it's like $1,700 or whatever. Type in that code, you get a deep discount. Do it quick, because hotels go fast.
They're gone.
They probably are gone. Get your Airbnb right now.
And that might be gone too. If I were out in San Francisco, I would definitely be getting out of my apartment.
I would totally be Airbnbing.
Yes, $3,000 a night. All right, let's do our typical every week. By the way, this is a semi-weekly podcast. We talk about all things Salesforce. We also go off and talk about cloud stuff generally, but I'd say, what would we say, 65% Salesforce related content.
We have, in the coming weeks, we have tons of just Salesforce news. They've made acquisition after acquisition. We had WWDC, so we have that to talk about with Apple and all their announcements. We have tons of stuff coming to talk about.
And the end of summer 16.
End of our Summer 16 blog post series, of which there's probably like 3 more to talk about.
About 3 more of those.
It just never ends.
Never ends. It's always going. So, but if you've never listened to us before, and this is the first time because you found us because we were promoted in a certain way, subscribe on iTunes. Subscribe. You can find us on iTunes. You can find us on Stitcher. We're in all those other places in the Success community, Facebook. We're on Twitter. Power
of Us Hub group.
We're in the Power of Us Hub. Go in there. Join there. We post all our podcast episodes there. But really, the place probably the best is blog.arkusinc.com, and there's all of the stuff you need. You can subscribe there. But what we do every week, we pick a CloudFocus app pick of the week. We've done 245 episodes. We've probably picked over 300 picks total each, because we've done total picks episodes where we just pick things. So let's go and give me your pick of the week.
Yeah, I'm going to do a really very focused
very classy thing to do.
Very classy. So I'm going to pick classy. Stay classy. Stay classy, Salesforce. So Classy is an online platform that allows users to set up pages to collect online donations. Now, their bread and butter is peer-to-peer fundraising. So that's like, think about when you do a walk and you get to set up your own page and then you send it out and everyone donates because you're doing a walk or a run, like you're running a marathon. So I'm going to donate some money towards your cause that you've selected, and but I'm donating it like peer-to-peer, right?
Yes.
To you. Or not to you, but on behalf of you, to the organization that you're
making this very easy.
I'm making this incredibly difficult. So Classy really, really shines there. They shine with online donation pages, really, really good-looking pages, responsive out of the box, really works well in this, mobile-first world. And they also have, I won't say, spectacular. They're working on event management stuff. You can put up a page and put up some basic, buy some tickets for certain prices to also collect that. And the reason why I'm picking Classy is because they have invested heavily in integrating with Salesforce. So if you are using Salesforce and you want to increase your online presence, well, you can use Classy to set up online donation pages connected to authorize.net or PayPal, and I think they support one other. I can't remember which one it is off the top of my head, and have that data flow right into your Salesforce, which is fantastic. So, you don't have to download something from, some weird system and upload it back into Salesforce and have dupes and all sorts of weird stuff. Just have a really beautiful donor pages and have the data flow right into Salesforce.
Nice. Classy. Also, I think there's pricing around it. Is there pricing?
It's variable. So I'm not going to quote.
C Classy.
You know what? You go to classy.org.
Classy.org.
And if you click on the pricing, they basically ask you, who are you? And they'll get back to you. So it's kind of variable.
Well, my pick is both strange, but it's free. And I don't do this often. I mean, you and I have been podcasting since 2007, so we're coming up on our 10-year anniversary podcast. We've done over 500 podcasts together, and I generally do two things. One, I generally don't take on new podcasts just because I listen to some. I don't ever listen to us because I hate listening to us, but I listen to a couple in a couple different areas. But Roger Mitchell here at Arkus suggested, and I mean, I've heard of this before. I've seen it number one on all the iTunes, but I just went, But Roger's like, you should go listen to this podcast because they were doing a series, like a self-help or a month of self-help, and I've been hooked. And now it's like, it's rising up to the top of one of my favorite podcasts. Although, again, very different than most podcasts. So Freakonomics Radio, it's at freakonomics.com/radio. It is a podcast. It is probably the most well-produced podcast I've ever heard in my life. It is edited. It is not like two dudes sitting in front of mics just talking away.
Hey, what are you talking about?
But it is highly edited, and it is great content. It is all over the place. It's heavy sometimes. I caught you and got you with the Leicester, story
Leicester City. You got me,
City.
And then all of a sudden I'm like, this is a great podcast. There's so many interesting. Well, I actually read that book.
Yeah. Which one? The Leicester City book?
Freakonomics.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Faint.
There's
Faint now.
There's three.
Well, I read the original. That's like one of 8 books I've ever read. I read that one. And I loved it. So it's really like the extension of the books.
And they get the author on actually sometimes, but it's engaging. So again, I don't normally pick podcasts because you should just be listening to us, but I guess you already listened to us and you already downloaded, so I don't really care anymore. But
at this point, people have stopped listening.
But if I like something and you like something, and we agree on it, then that's a big deal. So I say it's a very good podcast. So listen to Freakonomics Radio. You can find it anywhere. It's probably one of the number one thing. Everybody's like, yeah, duh. Like we've been listening to that forever. Well, that's it. So we will be back. We'll be back next week. Yes, we will be back next week. I think we can actually podcast next week. I'm just going to say next week, and then whenever we come out, it'll be the week that we do it. I'll be back next week. You can follow Justin at Just Edelstein. I'm at Jason M. Atwood. And, of course, the company's at Arkus Inc. We told you where to subscribe and all that. And until next time, as always, enjoy those cloudy days.